Welcome to the program. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Thank you so much for joining us here. I'm going to have a conversation with Mr. Mark Sawicki. He's Chief Commercial Officer at Cryoport, and he's joining us to talk about being the life sciences industry's global provider of temperature-controlled logistics solutions. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program, Mark. How are you?
My pleasure. I'm great. Thanks.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I have a PhD in biochemistry. I have been in the industry for about 25 years. Primarily through contract research, development, and manufacturing organizations in a business development functionality. I've been with Cryoport for approximately 5 years now, and been developing our business strategy and focused on the regenerative medicine or advanced therapies markets.
Now, I did mention that you're in the temperature-controlled solutions. What exactly is Cryoport working on, and does it work on several different types of projects, or are they all temperature-related?
Yeah, so let me explain that a little bit to you. So if you look at the history of drug development initiated as, the first drugs that came out were in essence what are called small molecules. These are, the pills that you take like aspirin or Tylenol or something along those lines. And those are manufactured through a chemistry process. They're extremely stable. And so you can, in essence, put a bottle of aspirin out on your back porch at 100-degree heat, and the aspirin will function perfectly fine, a day later, a week later, a month later. Mm-hmm. As the complexity of addressing disease states has progressed over the years, you went from small molecules to large molecules or biologics. These are the antibodies like Humira that you would take for arthritis or other things. Those materials themselves are much larger in size. They're more sensitive to temperature. And if you put the same thing, Humira out on your back porch, after 10 or 15 minutes, it'd be rendered useless. Mm-hmm. So you have to have much better control from a temperature standpoint on maintaining conditions that particular drug is being stored in. We're now moving into a third tier of drug development, which are called advanced therapies. So advanced therapies are in essence where a company will take your blood out of your own body through a process called apheresis. They re-engineer the T cells or B cells or dendritic cells to recognize and to address a given liability in your body, whether it's a cancer, it could be something like a spinal muscular atrophy or muscular dystrophy or graft versus host disease or some other thing along those lines. And they're, in essence, the goal is for them to be curative, right? But the challenge with these cell therapies is they're human cells, they're living cells, and they have to be stored and transported at liquid nitrogen temperatures, negative 196 degrees Celsius. Mm-hmm. And if you pull those out for a fraction of a second, you will render them useless and unusable unless they're being prepared for final dosage. So the challenge is to enable these companies that are spending all this resource to develop these therapies to get them to the end user. And that's what we focus on.
Tell me about some of these solutions that you have for these drugs.
Right. So what we do is we focus on risk management. And so all of the things that we develop, we focus on three legs of the distribution process. We focus on the packaging. So this is, in essence, the large thermos that these go into. And it's a lot more complex than that, but that's an easy way to describe it. It's kind of like your coffee thermos that you would, have, but much larger in size, much more control behind it, a lot of scientific configuration related elements that tie into it. You then have an informatics piece. So we have a specific software platform that manages the quality and the performance of those what we call them as shippers. They're really doers. It'll ensure that the doers function as they're supposed to. They have the proper hold times. They've been processed and cleaned properly. They've been requalified so that when you use them, you know exactly what the hold time on them are, how long are they going to maintain that temperature. But it'll also maintain, so all of that traceability data, we call it chain of compliance. But it also maintains all the data from the in-process or in-field transport. So this would be the GPS coordinates of where it is. What is the given temperature, internal, external temperature? Has it been dropped? Has it been turned upside down? Has anybody opened the package? It tracks and maintains all of that information. And then we also manage all the logistics distribution. So this is, in essence, the planes, trains, and automobiles to make sure it goes from point A to point B in the exact time frame that it needs to, because these therapies are very time sensitive, because if you're pulling the blood out of somebody to process, you have a 36-hour window to get into the manufacturing center before it goes bad, in essence. And these patients are typically very immunocompromised, so they're end of life. And if we don't, a delay of hours or a day could be terminal. So we have to ensure that the product, as it comes out of the manufacturing site, gets back to the clinical site for administration in the right time frame.
How much control does Cryoport have over the actual transportation? I'm asking, do you deal with third-party carriers and still track all of your equipment through its journey, or do you have your own dedicated fleet that ensures that the logistics or the delivery process goes according to plan?
No, you have to absolutely rely on third parties. We do have surface fleet that we're starting to populate to manage the local pickup and delivery of these units to and from our facilities or from manufacturing facilities. But they still have to go on to, a United Airlines flight or a Delta Airlines flight or a UPS flight. So we don't have control of that entire process. So what we do is we focus on understanding the risk of putting it onto a Delta Airlines flight or a UPS flight and ensuring that we have enough safety buffer if something happens or goes wrong so that the product isn't damaged.
Huge question. Where do you see Cryoport in the next decade or so?
So we're focused on developing a platform that manages the entire supply chain. So right now we're really focused on temperature controlled distribution, but there's a lot of aspects in addition to that are necessary to ensure that this process operates smoothly and efficiently. So one of the things we just, if you look at our releases, we purchased a company called Cryo in May, which is a storage facility. So this is storing those materials for research purposes or for drug substance or drug product for final dosing, right? And so we have the ability now to store materials as well as to move materials. And we're moving into more direct management of all the logistics competencies around it. So we'll have more direct control over, exactly what flights we're putting things on and how those are occurring in the coming months and years. And we're continuing to look at other aspects too around things like raw material management and other aspects related to the supply chain. So our goal is to honestly control as much of that supply chain as we possibly can over the next 10 years.
Where can we get some more information about your company and about some of these technologies?
Sure. So obviously our website, cryoport.com, has a lot of information. One of the other great resource to learn more about advanced therapies is the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine. So it's alliancerm.org online. Which is a fantastic resource to learn more about advanced therapies. And we're also a public company, so you can pull any of our SEC filings. We're listed at CYRX on the NASDAQ.
Well, Mark, I thank you so much for joining us here on the program this morning. Been quite eye-opening.
My pleasure. I appreciate the time.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Transcripts and audio of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, listen in, download it, SoundCloud, and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com, Health Professional Radio.